She wanted to say a few words to begin with, and then
yes, please. Can we hear? Oh, is he speaking?
No, I don't think so. He's there.
I hear sounds.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you all hear me okay?
There we go. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. For those of you who are on the audio only line that the UNOLS office sent around, there might be an issue with it. I was just trying to talk through that, and it seems it's not working. So forgive me for that. But well, let's get it started. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our first desk ocean policy virtual meeting. I think many, if not most of you on this call, have participated in the Desk Early Career Scientist program, and I'm delighted to see that you're all still enthusiastically engaged. Just quickly, in the coming months, you'll be receiving some other announcements about other early career scientist programs that we're developing, including some additional teleconferences with other prominent scientists and policymakers. We've been working on opportunities to have you all participate in some seagoing ventures to learn about how to design research programs, and how to work with the research assets. At DESK, we've also been working hard to revamp the website, and one of our objectives is to have something of a central clearinghouse for deep sea information for you all, as well as the more seasoned scientists. A number of us have been working with NSF to see if we can actually come up with sort of an effective small grant program to facilitate your participation in seagoing activities. And as we talked about before, at the early career science programs, oftentimes there's a berth or two on some seagoing expeditions, and it would be great to have not only a mechanism for you all to learn about those, but to actually get some financial support to participate. So kind of I'll keep you all posted on how that turns out. But for now, I'd like to start by thanking Jeff Harlow for taking the initiative to get this ocean policy group off the ground. He's been a great member of our community, and I think it's a testimony to show how a little bit of sweat equity, if you will, can go a long way. Jeff took the initiative to contact us and contact Dr. Earle and put this together. So well done, Jeff. And I'd like to thank the UNOLS office for their hard work, because they really helped me organize activities for you all and help Jeff pull this together as well, and they do a lot of heavy lifting. So, and finally, I'd actually like to thank you, Dr. Earle, for taking your time out of your busy day to speak with us. And without any further ado, we'll turn it over to Dr. Earle and Jeff, who will kind of help moderate the question and answer session. So that's all I got. Thank you all for being here.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of the action. I think we'll maybe just give a little bit of introduction and then turn it over to Jeff to be the provocateur. We're here in Alameda, California, which is the home base for deep ocean exploration and research, a company that is now 21 years old, referred to as DOER Marine Operations. It's a company I started in 1992, but Elizabeth Taylor, my daughter, and her husband, Ian Griffith, own and operate the entity as a base for designing, developing, and operating equipment for ocean access and other areas that are kind of tough to get to. But that's mostly in the deep sea, including, rather spectacularly, the piece of equipment that was tested last week at Lake Tahoe. It's on assignment from Northern Illinois University with funding from largely the National Science Foundation, but others have pitched in as well to make this remarkable piece of equipment possible. It's like 22 feet long and about 22 inches in diameter. It has to go through a borehole through the ice, 1 kilometer down in Antarctica, to look under the ice, to swim around in the liquid part under the ice in the Ross Sea ice shelf. This is a project that has been in the works for several years and stalled out a couple of times because of the peculiar but very real need to get fuel to melt the hole through the ice. It takes a lot of energy to melt even a narrow corridor through a kilometer of ice. And it also takes a lot of fuel to get out to the location in the Ross Sea where the experiments, the research is taking place. So, well, it takes a lot of effort and resources and so on to make the equipment. It has to get to Antarctica, and then once in Antarctica, it has to get to the research site. So all these things are finally, it's about 3 years, maybe a little more than that, to get to where the action will be before the year's out this year. So the test, though, just to demonstrate that this pencil-shaped, remotely operated system connected by a cable with a fiber optic link so that scientists on the surface can see what the vehicle sees, govern the vehicle's actions, govern the manipulators, point the camera, control the sensors, and most importantly perhaps, get the information back in real time. It opens up like a transformer toy when it gets to the bottom, and then it has to close up again at the end of the time that it's out swimming around, hours, days, longer if necessary, to get back up through the hole. But information gets constantly fed up to the surface all the time. The vehicle is out there, down there. That's one thing. Another piece of equipment that made history recently was a little piece of California that went to the deepest place in the ocean with James Cameron when he made his OTC mode descent to the deepest place in the sea, the Mariana Trench, in March of 2012. The manipulator arm that sported that classy Rolex watch on its wrist was built right here, along with many of the other auxiliary systems and testing too for the capsule and elements of what made that just a glorious success. So, other than that, there's a remotely operated vehicle system that was recently shipped to the University of Hawaii. It goes to 6,000 meters. Aha! That means that from that depth back to the surface, that's about 97% of the volume of the ocean is accessible with a 6,000 meter system. There are a few submarines with people on board that can make a descent that deep. Russia actually has 6,000 meter subs. China has a 7,000 meter manned system that was launched just recently, a year ago. It's in sea trials and actually active research right now as we're talking. It's cruising around in the South China Sea. Let's see. France has one system. Japan has a 6,500 meter system, manned system that I had a chance to use a little more than 10 years ago in Japan. And India is building one, but it's not operational yet. Our deep diving asset with humans on board, the Alvin, it has been operational since before most of you, maybe all of you, were born. 1964, it was launched. It's gone through many upgrades, renovations, and rebuilds, and the most recent one is just being completed. It's not going to go deeper than it has in the past, 4,200 meters, but it's basically able, with some adjustments going forward, to go to 6,000 meters. So we will once again be back in that small club of countries that has access to as much as half the ocean's depth. Still leaving on the board, though, that 3% that is still, for some of us, the holy grail. We need to go to full ocean depth. The deepest, highest place on the land is Mount Everest. The deepest place in the sea, the Everest of the ocean, is the Mariana Trench off the Philippines. That's where Cameron went in March of 2012. It's where Jacques Picard and Navy Captain Don Walsh descended for the first time back in 1960. We want to go again, both with manned systems and here at UER Marine, a manned system designed for full ocean depth. Not just on the books, an investment has already been made with some clever engineers, and it's something that any of you should pick up on this. You know, what's it going to take to get human beings to do the moonshot? It's been done now twice. 3 people have made that ultimate descent. But the reason why we need to go is because, first of all, the distance between half the ocean's depth and those deep trenches is this area. It's only 3% of the ocean, or maybe a little less than that. But it's an area the size of the United States, or Australia, or China, or Canada. You know, it's a big chunk of real estate. And that's just the bottom. It's also the water above that represents a unique pressure environment. We know life occurs there. And we don't know exactly what. We have some samples, microbes. We've seen echinoderms, brittle stars, and sea cucumbers, and other forms of life, trails of creatures that live in burrows. So far the observations total for what the 3 individuals who have descended to the deepest sea have brought back amounts to something about 3 hours of observation for an area the size of the United States, still virtually unexplored. Now, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution has a deep robot called Nereus that has explored on 9 different occasions areas within the Mariana Trench. It is a wonderful piece of equipment and should be deployed many more times. It's great for what it can do, but it's not a substitute for the human brain. We need all of these tools, robots, autonomous systems, man systems, and woman systems too, whatever it takes to do for the ocean, to understand the ocean. The one big thing, perhaps the biggest discovery that we have made about the ocean, and it took until the latter part of the 20th century to bring this into focus, and that is our lives, everything we care about, our very existence depends not just on liquid water that's out there, the ocean, but a living system that generates oxygen, takes up carbon dioxide, maintains the integrity, the chemistry of the planet that we occupy. There may be outposts on the moon, Mars. Maybe we'll get to some other place in the universe someday. But in the foreseeable future, we must make peace with the ocean. We must make peace with our life support system. The ocean is truly the blue heart of the planet, and it's in trouble. Another big discovery of the 20th century. We have the capacity to alter the nature of nature. We've seen it in the air. We've seen it on the land. Now we're seeing it in the ocean, too. Half the coral reefs are either gone or in the state of decline, the Tuna. 90%. And with the fish, gone. As we consume them. I mean, what are we thinking? The key is, now we know. We have seen the changes that we have brought about. Dead zones. They're beginning to crop up all around the coastal waters of the world. The good news is out there among those of you I'm talking with right now. Now we know. Now we understand. Now we're focused on the fact that we've got some problems that need the best brains we can amass to explore the ocean, understand what we can do to take care of the systems that make our lives possible. So, back to Jeff. Up to you now. So what are we going to do to
Great, yeah, thanks. So you talked a lot about the sort of international capabilities that are coming online with deep sea access and scientific institutions. But people are going to the bottom of the ocean for a reason. It's not always the science. It's often for resources, for oil. So on balance, is this a good thing?
Well, going back pre-21st century, the incentives for exploring the ocean, other than the sheer joy of trying to figure out what's out there, down there, and that motivates a certain segment of humankind, myself included. But sure, exploration for oil, recovery of oil and gas, and now minerals going back, well, really a long time, but came into focus largely in the 1980s. And actually, the interest in deep sea mining not only did derail the law of the sea negotiations, but keeps the United States sort of out of the action even today. It's not just mining minerals, but also mining the genetic resources that are there, and the concerns about what U.S. companies might give up if they become a part of the law of the sea. Well, we are a part of it. It just hasn't been ratified. The United States is one of the very small number of nations that have not yet ratified the treaty. The problem for us is that we're not at the table now when nations around the Arctic, although we're there physically, we're not at the table as a part of those nations that have ratified the law of the sea. And so others like Russia and the Norway, China, they're all talking about it, and they have a voice. We have to sit on the sidelines. Well, it's just one of those things that perhaps with our current Secretary of State, John Kerry, and actually there are previous several Secretaries of State, have been enthusiastic champions for let's get with it. But it's Congress, it's the Senate that has to ratify this treaty. But John Kerry has ocean, the blue part of the planet, high on his personal agenda. And using his influence as a former member of Congress, and of course now as our Secretary of State, and maybe because the time really has not only come, it's way overdue for us to kind of get in there, be a legitimate part of the action instead of wielding our power in other ways. So, fish, that's the other big draw. It's not the only one, of course, but throughout all of our history, starting wherever you like, we have been hunter-gatherers. But about 10,000 years ago, we could not have continued to feed even the relatively small numbers of people that then existed had we not shifted our source of calories largely to cultivation. And today, 80% of the calories that feed people come from a handful of plants, corn, rice, wheat, and to a growing extent, soy. About 13% of the calories that feed people come from mostly farmed animals, all grazers. Think cows, chickens, pigs, sheep, goats, whatever it is. They all eat grass, essentially, green things. We do not raise foxes or eagles or owls or snow leopards or other carnivores. It's just too costly. You know, it takes a lot of green groceries to feed the animals that then have to feed the carnivores that are out there. But in the ocean, curiously, right now, about 1% of the animal protein, or animals, the fat, the protein, all of it, whatever comes from animal calories, 1% comes from aquatic creatures, and half of that comes from wild creatures. And of that, a big chunk of it goes to feed cultivated salmon, cultivated shrimp, and cultivated cows and chickens and pigs. We feed them ocean wildlife. It's really bizarre. But that's how it has evolved, mostly in the 20th century. So actually, the very small portion of what we take from the ocean, about 80 million tons of wild creatures from the ocean every year, are taken. A relatively small amount of that actually gets into the mouths of people directly. Some of it goes by way of cows, chickens, and pigs, because we feed them wild fish, or farmed salmon, or farmed whatever it is that we tend to feed the fish protein meal. So it's not a big deal if we didn't kill fish. It's a tiny fraction of what feeds people. But it's an important fraction psychologically. It has some economic importance in some parts of the world. But for most of us, it's a choice. It is a choice. We choose to eat tuna. Nobody in North America really would think of eating tuna when I was a kid. I mean, a few, if they were desperate, would eat tuna. It wasn't on our culturally, it wasn't what we did. And only in coastal areas did people really enjoy fresh fish because we couldn't ship it around the way we can now. Fresh frozen, or even fresh, straight from the sea. Never touched a piece of ice, just boom, straight to us, thousands of miles away by fast transport. Anyway, our extraction, our appetite, our new cultural tastes, luxury tastes for wildlife from the sea has caused the populations of tuna and swordfish and sharks, cod, you name it, to go from where they were in the middle of the 20th century to where they are today, with on the order of 90% gone. The good news is we still have some sharks. There's still a few bluefin tuna out there, but most of them are swimming into sushi restaurants rather than going off to make more tuna. This is a crunch time for many of these species. Either they'll make it through the next 10 years, or we will have seen the last piece of sashimi from bluefin tuna and a lot of other creatures that now we think. Some of us think, well, it has to be okay because they're in the markets. Our policies haven't caught up with the reality of what we are doing to the ocean. And we have to come back to that reality. The ocean keeps us alive. We have to return the favor to keep the ocean alive through taking the pressure off. And to also realize that oil and gas extraction from the sea, as profitable as it is for many large companies, is, at least in the United States and elsewhere as well, enjoying some pretty hefty subsidies. So is the fishing industry. I heard Robert Zoellick, president of the World Bank, a year ago in Singapore at an Economist Summit, the Economist Magazine Summit, held an ocean conference. And Bob Zoellick made the announcement about a commitment on the part of the World Bank to put some investment in the ocean. And he said, hey, something that's mystified me as well, how can fishing not be wildly profitable considering that fish are free? You haven't fed the fish, you haven't paid taxes on the ocean, you don't have to buy your chunk of ocean. And some of those fish have been around, even the little guys like anchovies and Capeland and Menhaden. It takes at least 3 years, maybe 5 or 6, to get to the little fish that we see swimming in all those schools. They don't just happen in a few months the way chicken can go from an egg to an adult. No, the ocean moves with slower rhythms. It takes a lot of groceries at the bottom end of the sunlit food chain to make even the little guys that may only be 3 or 4 years old. And then they're eaten by larger fish that ultimately are taken by the big carnivores. So it's a huge investment, and fishermen don't have to pay for any of this. They just take. And we don't have to account on the big books about the loss, the way a company would have to account. When you take something away from your asset base, there's a subtraction on your balance sheet. Well, that doesn't work that way for fishing. It's just as if we're taking it from a perpetual motion machine, which the ocean now is perfectly clear. It is not. It is not. We're able to draw down the assets. We did it with whales. We did it with seals. In California, we did it with otters. Almost wiped them out. Miraculously, some survived and they made a comeback. Not to the level they were 500 years ago, or even 100 years ago, but better than they were at their lowest point. We can do that with other species too, but first we have to realize that the real value isn't oil, gas, wildlife. It isn't, what we take out of the ocean, or even using the ocean as dump sites. That's another way. It isn't recovering the treasure from ships that have been lost in the ocean. Although that's a great incentive for why people go explore. The biggest, most important thing we get from the ocean is the fact that we're alive. I mean, if you like to breathe, you'll say, "Thank you, ocean." If you appreciate the fact that water falls out of the sky, everyone should be on your knees. Thank you, ocean. Thank you. Thank you.
So I was curious about some of the things you were talking about, fisheries, and how to get that back in balance. Do you think that sort of marine protected areas are the way to go, or more financial controls at the larger end of the spectrum, or local education with these communities? What's the way to get fisheries back in balance?
I think the key in every instance is in our hands. It's knowing. It's getting people up to speed with the reality. People can't care if they don't know. But they might not care even if they do. And I've seen that so many times. It's like, it's all about me, it's all about now. I don't care about my kids. I don't even have kids. And kids annoy me, so I'm going to earn through the assets, and who cares about the future? Or they'll figure it out. I've heard that 100 times anyway. Oh, whatever it is that we're doing, don't worry. The kids will figure it out. Yeah, you'll engineer our way out of this. See, it's up to you. But the truth is this. For the first time, we are the beneficiaries of all that sorting things out, knowledge that has accumulated throughout all previous time. And it's the first time that we have the collective power of 7 billion people, the big collective mind, to communicate and to see from all points of the globe what's happening almost instantly. And we've never had that power before. And it's not all those people. We could do this with far fewer people. In fact, far fewer people would probably be a good idea. But it's the communication. It's the connection. It's the gathering of information. Now you can see patterns, not only about how to engineer things, that once you've got the materials, once you've got this piece and that piece, and so on, even though part of the solution may be in Russia, part of the solution is in Argentina, a big part of the solution may be here, a part of it may be in New Zealand. Anyway, there are ways now to pull together in ways that we couldn't do it before. We didn't know enough. And we see it with what's happening to the planet. We're seeing since 1980, evidence of the changes in the Arctic summer ice and the winter ice too. Changes in the ice cover in Antarctica, changes in the acidification of the ocean, changes in the diversity of life on Earth, changes in the extent of coral reefs, in the populations of fish. We're looking at the evidence and sharing the evidence. We could not do that when I was a kid. We just didn't know enough. And we certainly couldn't communicate with the speed that we're now doing. To have a conversation like this, even 10 years ago, just wouldn't be possible. I'd love to think that we can keep our act together over the decades to come to improve communication, to improve our insights. That's the solution. If you see yourself, not get some pompous individual to tell you, you've got to stop or else, but look at the evidence. Kids can access the evidence with a little telephone they carry in their pocket or their iPad or whatever it is that you use to access information. It's there. You can see the cliff, the tipping points. You can see what has happened in the past that has caused species or ecosystems or whatever to collapse or disappear. We're not making this up. We've seen, you can see in the lifetime of people such as I, still here, we've seen a different world. I say sometimes I come from a different planet because the planet I came from, is so different from what I see today. Well, everyone on the planet today can say the same thing in another 50 years. Because one way or the other, the planet will change. Probably faster than the time that I had just experienced in the previous decades. As the pace is picking up. And fortunately, so is the ability to communicate and to discover answers to the critical questions. Yes, we do need to have protected areas. It's like, here's the big blue engine that drives the way the world works. So, we've seen, just go back 50 years, you could go back 500, but a system that has taken all preceding history, 4.5 billion years of fine-tuning. Ice ages have come and gone. Comets struck the Earth. Things have gone up and down, wobbled along. But finally, within the time that humans have been around, Earth has been a hospitable place for us, with enough oxygen in the atmosphere. It wasn't always that way. You don't have to go back, very far in terms of Earth's history, like a billion years in Earth's history. That doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, to us, it's forever, but we couldn't breathe the air. We didn't have enough of the elements to make our lives possible. Now we've got it, and perversely, it seems like taking pieces out of the ocean, the machinery, the engine that holds the planet steady, regulates temperature, drives climate, weather, holds most of life on Earth, holds most of the water, and it would seem as if we've been given instructions to try to destroy it. Well, we're not going to destroy it, but we certainly are changing it. So, let's use this big brain power stuff that we've got and do the logical thing. Let's at least identify critical areas where fish spawn, where coral reefs are still in pretty good shape, the places that haven't been dismembered yet, the deep sea, under the Arctic ice. Nobody's ever been there before. Well, yes, probably toxic chemicals because of the circulation. They're under the ice, like everywhere else on the planet. They've managed to make the trip. Wherever you put something in the ocean, it'll wind up throughout all of the ocean eventually. And so there's no way on Earth, but still, systems that are much more intact, the more remote they are from human impact. So let's save them. They aren't on anybody's real balance sheet yet, so they're not undermining the wealth of companies or countries if they haven't even gotten to the high seas, the deep sea, yet. So the precautionary principle, the common sense thing to do, would let's save the blue part of the planet. Let's develop policies for the benefit of all of us, whatever we do. Anybody who breathes should buy into this. And do it now. You can always step back and say, well, now we know it's okay to do something here or there or somewhere, but well, there's still a chance. The high seas, that's the area that looms especially large, beyond national jurisdiction. It's about half the planet. It's about half the world. The part that's beyond national jurisdiction, the high seas. It's on the table right now. Can we show wisdom, restraint, to say, like the continent of Antarctica, let's get nations to agree we're just going to hold up. We're just going to abstain from major impacts until we kind of figure it out, until we really understand how can we dive in and use some of these things that we have short-term uses for, without destroying the integrity of the system that keeps us alive. It's like the principle that doctors have. First, do no harm. Let's try to think about that when you look at the ocean. First, do your best to do no harm. It doesn't mean you can't have ships careening across the top, or putting probes down into the ocean, or even taking some fish and taking some of the minerals. I mean, we're doing it. We're still here. But we should be consciously aware of the tipping points. We're perilously close on many fronts. We just need to realize that at this stage to shape our thinking, our actions going forward. That's our job. It should be your job. It's going to be on your watch that many of the most important decisions about the state of the ocean, state of the world, got to get it right.
So I know that through the Mission Blue Alliance, you've done a lot of conservation work, and that's involved designating 13, 14.
Well, actually, about 50 are
really?
will be launched at the Marine Protected Area Conference in Marseille in October.
Yep.
And that's in collaboration with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and scientists all over the world who have been gathering data, documenting this place, that place, some other place, and putting it together. It's basically an action plan for here are the places based on what we know, recognizing there's a lot we don't know, but this is just a thoughtful, not just harem scarum, let's do this. No, there's evidence-backed 50 sites to provide some insurance. We shouldn't stop at 50. We should say, first do no harm to all of you. One big blue hope spot. But that's the way it is right.
So how would that work legally? Do their own international waters? And then,
not all. Not all. Some are within national jurisdiction where there's a bit more muscle in terms of control. But through the United Nations, through policies that are currently in the works for governance of the high seas. It came up at Rio +20 last year. And it was disappointing that it didn't really rise to the level of action. In fact, the conclusion that made some of us almost cry in frustration was, this is a matter of such urgency that we will table it for 2 years. So, let's think about it. 2014, it will come up again. Maybe this time there will be something to develop a framework for governance for half the world, where every person, you don't have to have a coast to be involved. If you breathe, you're involved. If you like water, you do whatever it is you do with water. wherever, even if you've never touched the ocean, realize that the ocean truly touches you every day, and you've got a vested interest in getting this right.
So what's the traditional backlash to this? I know that there was a proposal to make some of the world's largest sanctuaries around Antarctica recently, and Russia didn't seem happy about this, but what was their reasoning, and how do you push back against that?
Seems odd, doesn't it? Russia is up here, the top of the planet, and Antarctica is down here at the bottom of the planet. And yet Russia, like several dozen other nations, have a voice there at the table for an organization that was put into place about the same time that the Antarctic Treaty was developed to protect the land. A small group of nations and then a somewhat larger group that now 40 plus nations are at the table to allegedly protect the living resources of the waters around Antarctica, the Southern Ocean. Part of the high seas. The waters surrounding Antarctica are technically part of that half of the world, beyond national jurisdiction. And a handful of nations have a disproportionate voice for extraction of krill, ice fish, and even marine mammals. They're seals. That started, though, with an interest in extracting krill, one of the largest masses of, some just think of them as protein, on the planet. It's also the cornerstone of the whole Antarctic ecosystem. Yank the krill, and it's like taking the cornerstone out of a building. Everything is influenced by taking out that piece. Anyway, we're just beginning to understand that there is not a real excess there for humans to take, even though it looks like it's enormously abundant. It's abundant in ways that transcend food for whales, food for birds, food for this, food for that. It's also part of the chemistry of the planet. They're carbon-based units, part of the carbon cycle, part of the nutrient cycle. We haven't had the ability, did not have the ability 50 years ago to think about the world in those terms. We just thought, krill, let's go get them. Fish, let's go get them. That's the way we used to think about whales. Let's go get them. Or oil, gas, minerals, whatever. Let's take. Ed Wilson, Harvard biologist, known to some for his love of ants, but to others as a philosopher, a thinker, and writer who pulls back and looks at Earth as a whole and shares with many concern that you could say it's doom and gloom. Oh, this is going to be the end of us. Live it up, burn brightly through what remains of this century, and then cataclysmic consequences because we failed to take action while we could. But he sees that is possibility, but holds very strongly, as do I, the other view, because we also can learn to live within our means now that we know. And he actually sees the latter part of this century and on forward as a golden time when we will have used our crafty engineer brains, our biologist brains, our poetry, music, art, whatever it is. The minds of people all over the world focused on how can we find a place for ourselves that doesn't destroy the very planet that keeps us alive. We can do this. It's hard with 7 billion people. It will be harder with 10. Nobody knows exactly what the limits are. We already have transgressed some of those limits, and we'll never see some of the creatures who were around when I was a kid, because they're gone. And whole rivers, streams, habitats have gone. But we have a planet that still works. It's our job, your big engineering job, for all of us. Let's figure it out. Let's build the machines. Let's build the networks of communication. Let's gather data, and then let's look at it. Let's figure it out. We can do this. We have to want to do it. You have to have an eye not just on today, not just the rest of your lifetime, but really have an eye on the future of our species. We want to be remembered as the generation that really set us on a track for a bright future, or we're going to be the ones who, ate the last tuna. Are we the ones who saw the last coral reef, or slipped up the last bit of shark fin soup, and then they were gone? No more shark fin soup, but there are no more sharks. That's within our power. We know how to catch them all. Or can we just say, wait a minute, I like those big toothy fellows out swimming in the ocean. Let's protect them while we can.
So I have a question from Benjamin Branch, watching in. He's curious how libraries can help in terms of curating data, collecting everything and getting that out in a policy sense.
Critically important.
I have somebody who's done some work with Google Earth Ocean.
Yeah.
So you can talk about how the sort of physical library branches and online curation can be useful.
Well, that's part of this extraordinary new body of knowledge and access to knowledge, communication. I think it's our best hope. Gathering knowledge and making it accessible so that we can have an informed public, and to also develop the ways and means of verifying. How do you see information that you trust? But to develop within the knowledge network sort of protocols, just so you, as a user, as a kid, anybody, how do you peel back the layers to know where the ultimate measurement or the data or the evidence, what it is derived from, instead of just swallowing whole a claim that somebody may make, such as, oh, carbon dioxide, we need carbon dioxide, don't worry about that. Truth is, we do need carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It drives photosynthesis. But we need ways to understand that what the real issue is, and to be able to not just get facts and figures available to us, but where did that information, where was it derived? Go back to the beginning. So libraries, whether they're physical, books, or whether they're, pick up the electronic device of your choice and tune in. It's critical that we have that information readily accessible and the ways to find out how was that information acquired and who did it. What's their role in this?
So we can end with this question. Maybe you're talking to a bunch of young scientists, and we all, I would assume, got into this because we care a lot about the oceans and want to figure out what's going on. What do you think is the best way to approach the policy arena while maintaining the impartiality of being a scientist? How do you bridge that gap and have a real influence?
Well, I just suggest that we encourage people to look at the evidence the way scientists do. Scientists are not making up what they're reporting. They're reporting what scientists do. They observe carefully and then report honestly what they see. And if they find subsequently that what they observed and what they reported that needs to be adjusted, good scientists will simply say so. Hoo-ha! I've refined my research, and now I see that I was wrong about this, or there's another avenue that we need to explore deeper, further. But whatever it is, to get the information there and to get the politicians, to get the policymakers, to get teachers, to get the public to look over your shoulder and say, here's what I see. You can see it too. You know, look at these images that NASA has acquired. And look how the scientists have lined them all up. Here's the way things were in 1980, 81, 82, 83. Just fast forward the picture. Look at Google. Look at Google Earth. Fly around the world and use the time slider that they have for some parts of the world. Getting better at this. Also getting better at diving into the blue part. And Google Earth was first marked. The ocean was just a big blob of blue. And the person in charge, John Hankey, at the time, realized at a conference that we both attended in Spain that, well, Earth is incomplete. You've got to finish it, is what I suggested. And he said, you're right, yeah. You need to finish it. And now, well, it's going to be a long time before the ocean is portrayed with the same detail that we have for the land on Google Earth, or that we have for Google Moon, or Google Mars, or Google Jupiter. We don't have as much information about the depths of the sea, or the water column. Only about 5% of the ocean has really been seen at all below diver depth, let alone explored, or with enough information to put it up on Google Ocean. But we're getting there. There's now an underwater street view that's careening around, at least in shallow water, enabling people, whoever, you know, your local congressman, your local mayor, your kids, you yourself can hop aboard a computer and fly around in an Australian reef. Geo-referenced that reef, exactly. You can go back there to that reef because it's pinned one in 5 years, in 10 years, in 30 years, and be a personal witness with street view images to show the changes. That's the gift of our time. I think that everybody should go get wet. My rule of thumb for a great education is no child left dry. It should be true of every senator, every representative, every leader everywhere. You've got to get out there yourself, if you can, to be inspired the most. But you can't get wet personally. You can vicariously, you know, with these new wonderful means of taking your mind there. You should take advantage of it. You know, scientists are not the best historically as communicators, but I think as a community, we're getting a lot better. Partly because, I mean, I'm a living example. I'm about as ivory tower a scientist as there ever was. I got shoved out of the ivory tower while I was making a transition from Harvard to Southern California. And I joined a project living underwater. And I couldn't imagine talking into a microphone with millions of people on the other end until I had to, as a consequence of living underwater in a public had such interest in it, that I was forced to get out of my comfort zone. Well, all of us now, in a sense, if you care about the future, are forced to get out of the comfort zone. Tell the others, the rest of the world, don't see what you see. You have almost an obligation to give back. Let them in on what you know. And just talk to your congressman as if you're talking to your 10-year-old neighbor. And tell them why you do it and why you care. I mean, I said as if you're talking to a kid because it's that level of communication. Find the kid in every grown-up, or find the kid in the kid. Appeal to their sense of wonder, their sense of excitement about being here at all. You know? It's such a trip being alive. It's such an extraordinary thing. You look at rocks, they can't think. You look at this chair, it's just sitting there. They can't see what you see. And so, hold up the mirror. Really take heart that you have come along at what is probably the most exciting time in all of history, that you can make a magnifying impact on everything that follows.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We can let you get back to building the amazing machines that are doing all this work. But again, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for yours.
And thank you everyone for tuning in
and get in touch. Look at DOER Marine. Look at the Mission Blue website. I'm basically in my heart of hearts a scientist, but I have worked with engineers for a big part of my life. All of my life, if I think about it. I just didn't know I was. But I do know now that we need to pull together and send us messages. It'd be great to hear from you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.